Are familiar with the law that just got unanimously passed out of our state senate.
No, I don't.
Not many people. And the reason I ask that, and I want to make clear that just a few people raised their hand, this has been very hush-hush. I haven't read a lot about it in the news media really, or anything like that. I guess one of my concerns is that there hasn't been a lot of talk about this in the activist community. There hasn't been a lot of information about the fact that this law, SB 1262, which is being sponsored by the League of Cities and California law enforcement, has passed out of our state senate unanimously, which means there's little to no chance that it won't become law this summer or early fall. Because when the state senate passes it, when the state senate passes something unanimously, the chances of it not going through the assembly pretty quickly are pretty nil to slim. There might be some additional amendments. When I read the League of Cities website page, and I posted it to my Facebook for other people to read, they were saying that they wanted more safeguards on an already very restrictive law. So the only thing that we're looking at changing probably once it makes its way through the assembly is seeing maybe even more restrictions put on it by law enforcement or the League of Cities. The League of Cities is this really, really old California lobbying organization. I think it dates all the way back to the late 1800s. So it's very well organized. It's very capable of getting the results it wants in the legislature. And then you put on top of it that, and you see the co-sponsor being, California law enforcement. Wow, we're up, against a lot. And what I was thinking is maybe the reason we're not hearing a lot, even from medical cannabis policy organizations, welcome, is that they can't really do anything. They're going up against a really powerful force, and maybe they're not going to get their way, so they're not promoting the law. They're remaining really neutral about it. And I know that, it's, like I say, law sometimes is a bit dry to go through. And what I want to kind of do before I get into actually reading the law and parts of the law to people is kind of explain the framework of what they're looking at. And for folks that haven't read the law yet, and if you have a computer or access to a computer, even if it seems boring, I'd love it for more low-income medical cannabis patient advocates and disability advocates and advocates in general to read it. It's SB 1262. You can go onto the California legislature website and start tracking it. Let's scare them. Let's show them how many people all of a sudden Monday morning are tracking this legislation that weren't even involved in the mix. So what this law is basically, there's two things that it's going to do that will really change our reality. One, it has a lot of restrictions around prescribing, or what we call secondary recommenders. So organizations like Medican, priceless evaluations, places where you can go and for between $35 to $125, and Lord knows it probably can even get more expensive, and get paid a certain amount of money, talk to a doctor, and get a medical cannabis recommendation, because perhaps you cannot get one from your primary care physician. Framework. But what it does with that, at first, their first proposal was outrageous, and luckily that got amended a lot so that it's more reasonable about the primary care physicians. But what they're going to do is they're going to kind of put some restrictions around the recommending physicians, because I think that there was a lot of concern from sort of the outer community that these places were just paper mills. They were just making a lot of money and cranking out recommendations to anybody that came in. Now, personally, I feel, and I support decriminalization, and that's one thing everybody should know about me. I support across-the-board decriminalization, and I think a lot of the reasons why people go to secondary recommenders like Medican, priceless evaluation, and etc., is because they don't have good health care. Everybody doesn't have access to a physician that's going to sign a medical cannabis recommendation, period. So to me, I'm not so concerned. My main concern about the sort of doctor mill, so to speak, was the price, and the fact that as a low-income advocate, when I went in to ask a lot of these recommending physicians if they consider veterans discounts, if they consider this and this and this, and I got flat out told by a few of them that they were running a business and that I needed to kind of get out of their way. And there were only a few that, you know, have been like, yeah, I'd love to do a few scholarships for folks that can't afford. And one of the people that we will hopefully have a representative from Medican at our next town hall in July, and they were one of the physician groups that were, you know, totally happy to give veterans discounts, gave them way back in the day before other folks. We're happy to consider scholarships for folks, even indigent folks that, you know, some folks that come to our end of the month dinners who have no way of, you know, ever being able even to pay $10, right? And unfortunately, a lot of times those are the folks most targeted for arrest, right? So for just to let folks know who don't know me kind of where my perspective is in all of this. But the outer world sees it as, oh, well, this is just a bunch of phony stuff. These doctors are phony and blah, blah, blah. And my response to that is there's already a medical board, and if they're doing anything that is against the law for a physician to do, we have a state medical board, right? And people can be taken there. But what this law does is it makes it so that your primary care physician needs to make your recommendation, and it also creates a board that, you know, is to yet determine sort of the parameters of how to recommend for medical cannabis. So we're looking at a situation where we might have even stricter guidelines than Prop 215. I'll take questions in a little bit. So that's one chunk of what this does. The other chunk of what it does is pretty major. And what it does is it makes it so that if you are growing, providing, or processing medical cannabis, you're going to need to register at the state level. So notice those are three words that are going to be key this summer. Grow, provide, or process. It doesn't say have a retail, you know, operation. It says whether you process, grow, or provide. So that includes people that have a trim site. That includes people that have a compassionate kitchen. That includes people that provide free medical cannabis to low-income patients. It's not about, you know, just our commercial facilities. However, it does give a small carve-out to primary care takers. To be a primary caretaker, is a very restrictive area. So very few cannabis providers have their patients living at their home and are providing their meals, their health care, etc. Very few people could probably fall into the category of a primary caregiver. There are a few people that, you know, have an aunt or an uncle that they're growing for that lives in their home, that they provide their medicinal cannabis and their general welfare for. But those people get, you know, a hall pass. It does offer a little bit of protection for patient cultivation projects by SB 420. That is also a very, very tight little corner. So let's say you've been a part of a patient collective and there's a garden and you all grow for each other, and in order to cover your costs for growing together, you take 1 pound of your 3-pound harvest to a medical cannabis dispensary. How many people know patient grows that do that?
Can you do that?
I'm not gonna admit it
Is it
publicly.
legal?
Yeah.
Hold on. So that happens all the time, you guys. If you are on somebody's wall, if you've given your paper, how many, okay, let me rephrase the question to get an understanding here so that people understand how this changes. How many people have given their recommendation to a grower in the hopes of receiving a portion of medicine at the end of harvest? That's nearly everybody. If you're a member of Axis of Love, if you've worked with any of the patient groups, almost everybody's hand should be up. Most of those groups have to pay their trimmers, have to pay electricity, water, nutrients, etc. And the way they do it is they take a portion to a medical cannabis dispensary that they're a member of and get reimbursed for that, and then they can buy the next set of clones and they'll pay for the electricity and etc. Or even if you're part of a patient collaborative up north and you're growing with the sunshine, there's still cost involved.
Farmers, period.
Farmers, period, exactly. So now, in order for that patient cultivation group to be legal, they're going to have to register as a cultivation site, because all of the legal medical cannabis dispensaries will no longer be able to accept medicine that isn't from a state registered cultivation site. Does everybody see now how everything changes when this law passes? So it's like if you live in this very strange utopian world where all of the medicine in your collective stays
Well,
in,
it comes from the government only. That's what you're saying.
kind of in a way, but
I don't like that.
very few people will be able to qualify as having an SB 420 closed circle patient collective. There might be a few up north, you know, there might be a few here and there that'll be able to be offered those protections. But most cultivation sites, because remember the 3 words are going to be grow, provide, process. So if you're growing cannabis, you know, even if you have, let's say, an extra guest room in your flat and you guys are all growing cannabis there, and 9 is the magic number in San Francisco. You have 9 patients that are growing medicine together in a spare bedroom. If you take any of that to be reimbursed for your overhead costs to a San Francisco medical cannabis dispensary, you will have to register that site, because the dispensaries will not be allowed to take that medicine unless it comes from a state registered facility.
Yeah, that sucks.
So the one thing that is good about this law that's unlike other states is that we're going to be going through the Department of Consumer Affairs. and they are going to be able to charge a registration fee that only covers the costs of making sure that you know, fit all the check-off compliances, which will probably be, you know, building inspection, fire inspection, and those things you want. You want safe grow sites, but you want people to be able to comply and come into compliance with the law as well. And what I'm concerned with is that a lot of people don't know this is coming and haven't started putting away that rainy day fund to be state legal. The other thing is, we might in San Francisco want to involve our Sheriff Mercarimi is a person that we might want to invite to our next town hall, because we might want to be able to go to our sheriff and check off on a small patient grow and be able to take that paperwork to the state level. And here's the other thing about the state level. In order to apply for that state level registration, you're going to have permission from your city or county. Pop quiz, how many counties in California have an outright ban on medical cannabis? Anybody know?
84, I think.
None.
It's a lot.
70 something.
It's close.
I think it's 72 counties completely restrict.
How many counties are there in the state?
I think there's like 300 counties maybe. Welcome.
Yeah.
So you have more than a third of California has a ban on medical cannabis dispensaries and grow sites within their boundaries. So if you don't have that slip from your jurisdiction or county that says that you are allowed to grow, process, or provide medical cannabis, that's fine. You can sit there. Sir, you can sit there, that's fine. Do we have another?
No, she's here.
I'm right here.
Yeah, because the person that's sitting there is a keyboard player, and she's actually filming right now. She's a multi-talented person. But, so in the counties, in the zip codes where patients have no access, they're always hurting. You know, if you're disabled or you have a seizure disorder like me, that means you can't even drive yourself to the next county. You're going to have to ask your friend. I'd have to ask you, hey, can you drive me into San Francisco to get my medicine? Now, you seem like a really nice guy. You might only charge me for the gas and want to smoke a joint with me. But a lot of people would say, yeah, I'll drive you, but you're going to have to get me a few grams too. And then your medicine goes from being pretty expensive to very expensive because you got to pay for someone to drive you, you got to, you know. So I've always had compassion for the people that live in counties where this is restricted. So then there's another level of restriction that comes in that. And that's what's going on in San Jose and Los Angeles. So in Los Angeles, through what I consider corrupt means, their city council banded in with Americans for Safe Access and the union and basically took out over 700 facilities and narrowed it down to 120 for the entire city and county of Los Angeles, all of whom happen to be members and signed up with those organizations. And not that those organizations haven't done some good stuff, but narrowing...
9.7 million people, 20% of them are patients.
Right, you cut down access in an amazing way in the city and county of Los Angeles, and now none of those facilities are going to be state legal that were cut off by ASA and the union, right? They're not going to be able to take... They're not going to be able to say, hey, and apply at the state level and go through some fair process. They're just out of the game. Once that happens, they just become outlaws. They just become illegal. Recently, we had this similar thing through not so much industry corruption, but through political corruption happen in San Jose, where just recently they passed restrictions where 80% of their clubs are going to be pushed off the map. And to each cannabis facility, you know, if you sort of unveil what really happens, there's probably 10, you know, compassionate kitchens and several different grow facilities that bring their products to that one facility, right? So attached to all the people that are, the facilities that are getting pushed off the map in San Jose and Los Angeles are also lots of cooks, lots of trimmers, lots of growers, losing jobs, etc. It's not a happy thing to me, and I don't think it's necessary. I think that there needs to be a fair process, and cannabis basically is so needed for such a variety of people that we have yet to see a cannabis club anywhere go out of business.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, even when we were talking about the Excelsior in San Francisco, and they were, you know, we had fake progressive John Avalos all upset about, you know, oh, all of these cannabis clubs, blah, 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 we don't need them. When I actually talked to most of the cannabis club owners in that area that were already established, they say it would have been good to have one open up because they're getting too much traffic in that area and they actually need to be more manageable. So, you know, I don't think those types of restrictions are fair, but that's what's going to come down because, again, who are the sponsors? The League of Cities. So they're basically saying to each other, I'm going to respect your jurisdiction's laws. So the San Jose is saying to San Francisco, hey, we don't care what you do, but in our jurisdiction, we're only going to have this small percentage of clubs. And I believe their mayor referred, our friend Dave Hodges said, well, we're going to get a voter initiative going in San Jose, and let's give a round of applause for Dave Hodges doing that. The mayor said, in response to that, oh, well, we don't want any of this loose goose distribution, right? And it's like, loose goose, my gosh, the clubs go through a lot of processes to be regulated. They're more regulated than any business in any city, more regulated than the bars, the liquor stores, the massage parlors. I mean, come on. There's no loose goose going on at any of the registered cannabis clubs, right? So you have this whole apparatus going in place where everybody's that's gonna be sort of in the legal realm is going to have to be doing business only with other people that are in the legal realm. And that means having your facility, you know, if you're part of a patient grow, please go home and make a phone call tonight and tell your friends to look up SB 1262 and take a look at it. Everybody needs to get ready for it. And then there's another little thing in there that we really haven't experienced before. And it's interesting to me because I see what law enforcement is trying to do. They're trying to prevent sort of the white-collar crime and the theft that goes on from within the industry. So everybody knows that Colorado has the system that's called seed to sale. Right? So in the Colorado legal grow facility, there are cameras. There are government cameras in that facility that track how much medicine is coming from that facility. They track the transportation, and then they weigh again when it arrives at the other facility. Now that may seem burdensome, but in a way I kind of don't agree. I don't disagree in the sense of a lot of the theft and a lot of the ways things get to other states and etc. is because there isn't some oversight of how the medicine gets from point A to point B. It also helps the people that are transporting the medicine from point A to point B to deal with any law enforcement encounter of why do you have, say, 20 pounds of sour diesel in your car. or your truck. Why? Because I'm taking it from this agricultural site to this distribution site, which is what happens with agriculture, right? And this is, at its core, agriculture.
Right.
So I see the reasoning, but what I also see is that a lot of people aren't ready for that, and a lot of people don't trust the government for a lot of good reasons.
Yeah, that's the amount of money.
You know?
Yeah, they don't run
And
the
it
farm.
didn't stop the black market from existing in Colorado, okay? It's not going to stop the black market. What it's going to do is it's going to make that bright line for law enforcement of legal and illegal. And of course, what Axis of Love's position is we'd like to see decriminalization and safe regulations. We don't want to see laws that everyone can't comply with. We want to see laws that everyone has an opportunity and an ability to choose to comply. What this could do is it could undermine a lot of the gourmet, what I call gourmet growing, right? I mean, everybody loves medicine that's actually been cared for. Everybody knows now, I think in the last 5 years, kind of the taste of the more commercial factory medicine, right? I mean, does everybody feel like they've had gourmet medicine and factory medicine?
Yeah.
Pretty plain.
Yeah, it's pretty plain desertion, and my fear with having a law that's hard to comply with is that you push a lot of the mom and pop growers out because they're like, wow, I'd have to have building inspection, a fire inspection, and then you need, hey Brett, welcome. You need to be able to have the seed to sale, be comfortable with at your grow site having the seed to sale thing set up. And then on top of that, there's a layer of background check for the actual operators. So I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but in San Francisco, we do have a background check for operators of cannabis dispensaries. So for example, when I helped open up Sanctuary in the Tenderloin, as an operator, I had to go down to the police department and they do what's called a life scan, where they scan your hands and they do a background check in San Francisco to assure that I haven't committed a violent felony in the last 5 years. And I agree with that. If I had committed a violent felony, I don't want rapists, murderers, people that batter women, children, etc. I don't want them to be providers of medical cannabis, you know. I could care less about that, you know. I think that's fine. I didn't have a problem going through it. I have no criminal history. One thing that we did as Axis of Love, and with people like Brent Salpe and other activists, is when they were discussing this, when we were creating our laws, we made sure that it was a conviction of a violent felony. Because you know what charge a lot of us do have on our record?
Marijuana.
Possession, cultivation, etc. We didn't want to be taken out by that. So in San Francisco, we were able to come to middle ground with our city government and say, let's do violent felonies in the last 5 years. That's something we can all agree upon in San Francisco. We do not want violent felons distributing medical cannabis. We don't care if you have a cultivation charge, let alone a possession charge, come on. What's going to happen with this new law is that it's not a violent felony within the last 5 years. They are going to go through your history. You're going to be turned in to the DOJ. The DOJ is going to go through your history, and then there's a channel that links it, and this is something that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. Then it goes to the FBI.